thank you guys. I think we're ready to get rolling now. We have a presentation on technology. Ms. Flannery, I think, is going to lead us. Take it away.
Take it away.
Yeah.
Mr. President, members of the board, Mr. Narducci, I'm very excited to be here and plan on updating you on our priorities and our initiatives in technology. I stood here probably 10 years ago doing a presentation, and hopefully I won't bore you to tears like that one. But that one was about our student information system, data warehouse. We had something on the assessment system, and it really was operations focused. We probably had about 10,000 devices that were hanging on our network at that time or connected to our network. Fast forward through COVID, 10 years later, we have about 75,000 devices connected to our network, to give you a little scope of the change that's happened in the 10 years. And we've really moved from technology supporting operations and being an afterthought with education to really technology is not only important for operations, but also in the teaching and learning experience. And it's really, really important that we focus on technology because it attracts students to our district and it attracts talent to our district. So before we get into the priorities and initiatives that the tech department has been focusing on this year, we have a new building at Perry. It's not a new building, it's new to us. A new location for all of the tech staff. We're at the Technology Innovation Center, and it's the old transportation, not the old transportation, but it's one of the transportation buildings that is at Perry, and the entire tech team has moved over there. And before I get started, I'd like to introduce the team that makes everything possible. So I have John Andrews, he's our Director of System and Admin. Tucker Moyer, he's our, stand up, he's our Technical Services Supervisor. CG Youngdahl, she oversees our help desk system support. Sean Creighton, he is our Director of Instructional Technology. And last but not least, Scott Leatherman oversees network and infrastructure. These fine folks here work with me to, You can't have a tech presentation without technology going crazy. But here's some pictures of our new tech center. We oversee about 60 staff members, instructional design, instructional technology, network infrastructure, tech services, systems and applications, and the support team. I didn't forget anybody, did I? And this is our new space that we work to collaborate and support our teachers and our staff and our students and really solve the difficult problems that we have and that technology needs to support. So today we're going to have a three-part presentation. I'll cover our major goals, priorities, and initiatives for this year, really highlight the things that we've been focused on. As a tech department, post-COVID, we've really had to step back and really evaluate things and make sure that we are on the right track and we recover from some of the decisions we made. I have Coach Riley here that will talk about one of our implementations this year at Basha High School with esports. And we have a short video that Basha High students produced for us about that program at Basha High School. And the last thing that we'll do is tonight on the agenda, we will be discussing interactive flat panel and a purchase and a project we'd like to do. They'll be discussing the teacher input, how we selected the interactive flat panel, and then doing a demo for you, and hopefully we'll have some time if you guys want to come down and experience the interactive flat panel. For this school year, we've, as a department and a leadership team, really identified 6 areas that we focused on. We really wanted to look at post-COVID. We added a lot of technology, a lot of applications to our environment. What does that experience look like for staff and students? Is our Wi-Fi robust? Are the devices adequate? Is it impacting teaching and learning? Do we have all the things that we need in order to move our students forward? We also took the time to evaluate and are currently in this process working with the curriculum instruction team to determine what do we really need when we talk about the learning environment and what I call it the teacher stack, but what do teachers need in order to teach in the 21st century and really create these immersive experiences for students? Of course, our focus is on cybersecurity. As you know, cybersecurity has been front and center in K-12 and all of public sector. During COVID and post-COVID, we've been a target of a lot of different attacks, so we have to focus on that as a school district. Student safety is a concern. How do we support the initiatives in Chandler to support our students, whether it be with applications or devices to help maintain our student safety? One of the biggest concern as an organization, but specifically in IT, is how do I attract and retain talent? How do I grow? What are we going to do as we have an aging IT department? How do we get new folks involved and get them the skills they need to support our school district? And then lots of work have been done this year with Lana. And how do we create a budget that's sustainable, that we can project and really refresh and keep the continuity of learning with our devices and our network being refreshed at a regular rate. So let's talk about the student staff experience. As you may know, during COVID, if you had students or if you talked to some of our folks, we added a lot of different applications and a lot of different digital curriculum. And what we really wanted to do is that experience needs to be seamless for students and not get in the way of instruction. So if you have different passwords, different logins, different ways of getting on, that's extra time for students and for staff to get to different applications. So one of the projects we decided as a team that we needed to focus on is how do we get students and staff onto all the different applications. If I remember correctly, I think for students we have 63 different things that they have to go to, and staff is probably about the same. And if we have different ways of logging on, different passwords for it, it really creates some bad habits, and it's really not effective for staff or students. And they do things like put Post-its up with their passwords, which is what we don't want happening. So what we're trying to do is streamline that, base it all off of one login so that their password and their login is the same for all of our applications. This is a big overhaul, and I want to say it's been 7 years in the making. So we've really wanted to focus on this, and that'll allow students and staff to get to what they need to do and not have to go through a laborious process or remember all the passwords. We wanted to increase our customer service for our staff. How do we respond to IT? We've added in the past 2 years 35,000 devices into our ecosystem. How do we get services out there in the time that we need? So this year we've been implementing a customer service request system called Incident IQ. So that's been a project, and along with that customer service request, there's an asset management. So one of our jobs this year is to migrate every single IT asset into a database that will be under the customer service request. So as a teacher or a staff member, I can pick my computer in my classroom and send that request to IT so we can provide service. We approved the E-rate project. I think that was in the end of February, and that will allow us to update all of our 712 access points and increase or improve the wireless experience for our 712 schools. The APs are about 7 years old, so they're on the older edge of technology. And along with that, we are replacing switches at both the high school and the elementaries to improve the experience, whether it's a wired or a wireless device that students or staff are on. This year, I think it's tonight, we are also on the consent agenda. We have decided to go down with managed print. We have about 1,800 printers in our system, which is more than the state of North Dakota has as a state. So we really are pretty large. And to manage those and do the things that we need to do and keep them updated and keep our network safe, we're going to move into a new way of managing print. We won't have to order the cartridges anymore. It'll allow the software that manages it to ship the cartridges when we need it. It allows us to see everything on the network and do some more sophisticated things when it comes to updating firmware and that type of thing. And that will save us some money, and it will also create a more secure environment for us. Esports has been a focus this year. I think the AIA may have had it for 2 years, but Riley, has it been 2 years? Okay. 2.5 years. Esports is now an AIA sanctioned event. We realize that's something that the students are doing at home, and really wanted to bring that experience to our students in Chandler, and all of the high schools now have esports rooms that students can compete in the AIA, and really going to save that a little bit because Riley's going to talk about that. I'm going to have a great video, but that's been about a year-long planning project. We had to set up our network a certain way and also get the right devices and equipment so the students can compete with the 3 games that they're allowed to through the AIA. And the last focus we've had on the student staff experience is student devices. Over COVID, we made lots of purchases and just try to get through and get students devices at home. And what we've done this year is really try to focus on what kind of device do we need at each grade level? Why do we need it? What are we going to do instructionally? And then how do we create a sustainable refresh cycle so we don't have 8-year-old devices hanging on the network that are a security risk? So we've worked really hard to transition some old technology into Chromebooks. We have purchased some devices through E-Rate. I think we got 15,000 last year. That put almost all of our high schools at 1-to-1, and really focused on how do we have a device for every student K-12. And I at the end, I think it's July, by the time we move everything around, we'll be there. We'll have enough devices for every student to have one. And it's really important. It's just become such an important part of the teaching and learning experience. There's so many things that we have that are digital now and that they're not writing, and also it prepares the students. So we have selected iPads for K1 and possibly 2 next year. We put Chromebooks in 3.6, and currently we have Chromebooks in 7.12, but we're going to move towards Windows devices so they can do some more advanced things. So in March of 2023, we were able to rearrange, create some new Chromebooks from some of our older technology, and those went out to all of the elementaries. This June, we'll be receiving in June, we'll rearrange and get 2nd grade Chromebooks. And then by July or August, our purchase that we made for iPads should be coming in, and all of the K1 will have an iPad to use in the classroom. And this allows us to serve every student. We can do some things at the network level that allows students to have personalized devices. It helps us with assessment. And if we have students that don't have connectivity or a device at home, it allows us to serve that need too. Currently, only 7-12 take their devices home. K-6 students, it will stay in the classroom. Teacher stack, again, this is an area, we purchased the software. We bought a lot of different things during COVID. We bought Pear Deck, we have Cami, we have Buzz, we have all of these different applications, and we were trying to serve a need. So this year I've been working with the Ed Tech department and the curriculum department is, what do teachers really need to teach in this new environment? What kind of tools do we have? All the tools that we have, do we need them? And we purchased a software called Catch On. I think Digital Insights now. They rebranded. That will allow us to do some analysis. We've been working with Dr. Egger and her team. Is where are students going? Are they using the curriculum that we're purchasing? Are teachers using the tools that we've given them? And it will help us look at our licenses and our purchases and analyze really, is that impactful for teachers and for students in the classroom? We focused on the learning environment. Again, trying to create really immersive experience for students. A lot of the research out there talks about this 3D experience. How do you get students involved and engaged in the classroom? And as we worked together and worked with the curriculum department, we selected interactive flat panels to replace our projectors. Our projectors are very one-dimensional. There's no touch. It can't untether the teacher. And later in this presentation, you'll get to see a demo and the outcomes that will come from that. And that project is set to be started if you approve the action item tonight in all of our schools, and that'll take us some time. We'll table that for a little bit to talk about the outcomes, but that's something that we focused on and determined that was necessary in the classroom. We're looking at teacher stations. We purchased laptops during COVID with ESSER funding, and they currently have desktops. But now the way that the laptops are going, and with the implementation of IFPs, we can actually redesign that teacher station. What does it need to look like? Look at and evaluate, do we need the desktops, or can we use the laptops and get a docking station or a monitor that's a docking station? Plug in that laptop, have a monitor in it, and work in that system. So that's something that we're currently evaluating to determine our next steps. And then we really wanted to focus on, one of the issues is the teachers are up at their station here and their projectors up there, and they don't have the ability to move throughout their classroom. So we wanted to figure out a way to cast and untether our teachers and defront the room. And we were just really fortunate because we've looked at a couple different solutions, but when we talk about the interactive flat panel, it actually includes a casting ability. So not only is an interactive flat panel allow the teachers to use their laptop and move about the classroom, and we all know that's important for several different reasons, and I know the ed tech team will discuss that. Cybersecurity, of course, that's always on our mind. Every time I see a news report, Scott and I get a little angst and butterflies in our stomach. But we really have been focused on how do we move from a reactive state when it comes to security into a proactive state. So we've been implementing different things and how to integrate all the data we have at the network level into a consumable fashion. How do we monitor all the different things that happen? We have outside threats, we have inside threats. How do we address that and find out what's going on and react as quickly as possible? We focused on it's going to happen. We have all sorts of things going on outside and inside. How do you respond to it? We've been working really hard on our response plan and making sure we have a playbook that's set up if we have certain threats that happen, and then developing policies and procedures that we're taking a look at all the things that we did during COVID and how do we bring it back to be really secure and make sure we're following all of our best practices. And then the most important part of cybersecurity, believe it or not, is user training, is helping people understand what they're doing when they're clicking on things and what impact that has. So we do have a regular awareness training we do in our annual best practices, but we're going to increase that and really focus on what are the best practices and how do you protect your data, how do you protect yourself, our system, and we'll start that with our staff and even planning on getting that with our students too, because when you look at the threats in K-12, it's really a majority of them have been users that have clicked on something they shouldn't have. Student safety, we installed elementary cameras at the end of last year and finished up this summer to add an additional 8 to 10 cameras at each site, and then finished our secondary schools with the cabling, and we're in the middle of installing. Every school is a little bit different, anywhere from 20 to 70 cameras at our secondary schools to help with student safety and add to the monitoring. And then in July, we will be implementing Lightspeed Alert, which monitors the email and the drives and the different tools that we give students to determine if there's anything that we need to be proactive or react to in what they're producing, whether it's email or drives, to give our counselors and our administration additional tools to, if they're concerned about a student or they are concerned about their safety, they have some additional data there. Attract and retain talent. Again, it's all of us, the entire organization's doing this, but specifically in IT, we don't We don't pay like the industry does. And so what we really are focused on is creating an IT culture that people want to be part of our IT department here. And we have a bigger mission supporting students and teachers. And how do we get people that want to be in our department and then focus on upskilling? We've purchased some curriculum for our IT folks so we can create pathways on the network side, on the coding side, and on the services side to help grow our own and make sure that we are able to support, because technology is not going to go away. It's only going to increase and accelerate and continue to be important in teaching and learning. And so how do we focus on keeping our talent, attracting talent, and then developing our staff into additional positions that are more skilled, and then also leadership development. We've been focused on that. And last but not least, Lana and I have spent lots of time together, and we're really focused on creating a budget. Really, we'll spend some time in May on the details of that, but it's really important to get it all. Like, if we were to replace everything, what is the end of life on all of our technology devices? How do we budget for that? And then how do we create a refresh cycle that enables our students and our teachers to have great experiences and also protects us from a security standpoint? So we've been working that through all year. Lots of iterations trying to get all the information so it's comprehensive, and I believe we're going to go into more detail of that in the board planning session. So that concludes our major priorities and our initiatives. So the next two sections of the presentation will be, we'll talk about the esports program, so you can see actually what technology can do, supporting and really doing something novel. I was with a consultant on Monday that let us know that we're out there with esports. This is something that's going to attract your students, but also there's lots of other outcomes that Riley will talk about specifically. But before I let him come up here and talk about his program, we have a video that was produced by the CTE class at Basha High. Remind me again. Multimedia class at Basha High. The CTE students produced this, and it gives you a little scope on what the esports program looks like at Basha High.
Huge impact on people's lives, including our very own esports team.
And it's good!
Basha Esports is starting their new season. They'll be streaming and competing in games such as Super Smash Bros., League of Legends, and Rocket League.
Basha gets the kickoff, rotating around,
trying to set up teammate Bro Jazzy, who sets up your robo. What a play!
It's just the skill set's different. It's definitely cerebral, where it's all hand-eye coordination, mind. It's less physical, but it's definitely very fun. And plus, you essentially get to play a game, and if you're good at it, it counts as a sport.
Oh, it's not over yet. If I flash keys onto the gym, and it's still going.
Mainly, having this news program here is nice because it'll attract attention to this, industry. It's, I think last year there was a statistic about a couple billion worth of scholarships from esports, and I think just this news attention is very nice, especially for Basha High, and kind of having this attention will allow us to grow this program. And this implementation of esports is kind of bringing technology more into schools. I think that's very interesting.
The edge guard but fails to get it. All you here is to get one good smash attack in to kill, like that.
I'd like this program to grow. Once AIA sanctions more games, it'd be nice to have maybe at least 50 members within 5 years. I think that's pretty reasonable. And as long as we attract attention to the program, I think it's very doable.
They live stream every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at the BHS Esports YouTube channel. Tune in to support Basha Esports and see them compete.
It's really neat to go down there. If you haven't seen an esports event, I saw my first one with Coach Riley, and it really is from a tech leader standpoint to see all the work that we've done, worked with Lana to get the budget, and really see it put into production. So Coach is going to talk about it a little bit right now.
Hello. So good evening. My name is Riley Seal, and I'm the proud head coach at Basha High School. I've been involved in athletics the majority of my life, both as a player and as a coach. Sports provide a community in which athletes foster relationships, build teamwork, communication, and critical thinking skills. The 3 years into coaching esports, I can definitively say that our sports does exactly the same thing. In our program, we are excited to showcase the new athlete, providing all the same benefits of sports to a new array of athletes. As a program, we prepare for our competition by reviewing game film, scouting our opponents, and coming up with a game plan. All of our titles provide a number of challenges that athletes must strategize and communicate to overcome. For example, before a League of Legends match even begins, there's over 2 quadrillion ways a match can go. Collaboration is the essence of sports. Our program expands way beyond our team. As you can see with multimedia, we've been working really closely to prepare graphics, stream all of our matches, providing students with an experience in modern broadcasting. Our cybersecurity program, in which many of our students you see are a part of, have a very valuable experience coming in because many modern employers seek out these types of athletes because of the critical thinking skills that they're using to avoid obstacles like cybersecurity tends to provide. All right. So ultimately, just like all other sports, we try to set up our students for success by providing lifelong skills that they can use in any industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Coach. Again, this is just an example of how this is the end product, but technology was essential in supporting to attract students. My favorite story from Riley was I went out there and he said all the students last year were at home in their own rooms and they were competing, and that's how the team competed. And then we got the equipment there, they all came, and he had the uniforms, and it was, you know, these students hadn't been together and hadn't done some of the things that we all experienced in say football or softball, but this allows, and supporting this allows students to experience that at Basha, and attracts. And I think you went from a couple students to 20 in a couple days, and it's something that is definitely popular with our students, and it's not just AIA. I think there's other implications, as he said. It really works. They have the CTE department when I was down there actually doing the video. They have a student announcing it. So there's lots of different roles and skills that the students are learning as they're competing in esports. The next part of our presentation will focus on the interactive flat panel. I have the entire ed tech department here. They are here to support 2 of their colleagues. Sopani Tipke will be presenting about the interactive flat panel and our experience and how we involve teachers, and then Jason will be giving a demo to all. We'll give some time for question and answers, and then if you guys want to come down and experience the board and play with it a little bit, hopefully we'll have a little time with that so you can really get to see what this will do for our teachers and our students.
Hello. Is this on? Okay. Mr. President and members of the board, Mr. Narducci, thank you for this exciting opportunity to discuss and demonstrate this interactive flat panel. This is going to open the doors to many possibilities for our teachers. It's going to add to engaging instruction, authentic participation with students, and increased access for all of our students. I'm going to go over some of the outcomes that we're expecting. We're going to see greater flexibility. That's something that we see right now in technology, is the need to be flexible. And with this interactive flat panel, we're going to see the flexibility with teachers in terms of how they're going to structure their lessons. You're going to see a lot more interactive and engaging activities with students. We often say the concept of the sage on a stage. Well, we're trying to change that concept and make the stage the entire classroom. We're going to streamline the lesson planning process by including the multimedia, and it's so much easier to see how we streamline it with the ViewSonic flat panel, which Jason is going to demonstrate in just a few moments. It's also going to provide a lot of accessibility tools, which will benefit all of our students, not just a few, but every single one. And not to mention, Colleen mentioned earlier about untethering. Education and student performance is tied to a lot of personal connections. And you need personal connections to happen, which means we as a technology department need to untether our teachers, move them away from the desk, move the students around, and again, provide a flexible atmosphere. All right, so one of our core values in the technology department, actually, I think I do want to move around. Is that okay? Yeah. I like to use my hands. One of the core, oh, sorry. One of the core values of our technology department is to actually, I woke everybody up, engage the end user. We can't be making decisions with the end user not having any part of the decision-making process. So the outcomes I mentioned previously, in addition to involving the end user, is demonstrated right here with our data. So at the top, I want to mention our IFP selection process. This was over a 10-day span. We invited over 3,000 employees to take part in this focus group. Over that 10-day plan, we made sure that we provided time periods that were before school and after school. We have elementary schools, junior high, and high school schools all on a different schedule, and we wanted to make sure to accommodate all their needs. From those 10 days, we had 145 employees sign up for in-person focus group sessions. Of those 145 in-person sessions, we had over 242 completed evaluation forms. Now let me explain a little bit about the evaluation. When they came in for the focus group, we had 4 different flat panels available. We didn't market any name brands. They literally were just A, B, C, and D. And we asked the participants to go interact with the boards, to evaluate the boards. We made sure at least 2 of our team members were there available to answer any questions. So it was really valuable for us to be there because we got to watch and experience the teachers interacting with something new at the same time, looking at how excited they were with some features. I mean, let's say you had a teacher who could not attend in person. That's a reality these days. We provided an email feedback form for teachers to still submit what your preferences are, your priorities are, because they, again, are the end user. And with that, we received 532 email feedback forms. It's pretty good. That means we included over 700 stakeholder feedback in making this decision. Like I said, the core value of including the end user. Now, with that said, we feel that the interactive flat panel in front of you, which is the ViewSonic, is going to be the best choice to move forward. In the EdTech team, we often work with professional development and training for teachers. We often use the SAMR model for our framework of technology integration. That includes substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. All of those do not live in isolation. It's a fluid continuum. And knowing it's a fluid continuum, we wanted to make sure we could provide a flat panel that any teacher, regardless of comfort level with technology, would be able to jump in and use immediately. Here are some activities that can be used and supported by the interactive flat panel, the ViewSonic, based on each level. You have the substitution level, which is pretty simplistic, but it's a way for you to use digital whiteboarding, access to your curriculum. And then you have innovative teachers, which we do not want to hold back with our technology. They can move all the way up on that large spectrum to redefinition by incorporating a lot of multimedia into their lessons. I also wanted to kind of point out hold on here, I lost my place. Okay. When we were in there and we're working with the teachers, that was the most valuable part, having the teachers come in and do the focus group, because that's when we saw the best learning experience. And we're looking forward to collaborating with those teachers because we barely tapped on the potential of this board. It's the teachers and the students and us working all together that's going to be able to see the full potential that we can have with this flat panel. So here's the fun part. We're going to go to Jason, and he's going to demonstrate some of the functionality.
So thank you so much for giving us the time today. I have the opportunity to show you guys the ViewSonic viewboard. We just planned kind of a brief demo for you because we thought it was really important for you guys to get your hands on the board and come down and experience it. That's really the best way.
Can I ask you, you guys a couple of questions before we do that? And I don't care which person answers, is the software that we use for this, is it subscription based? Do we have to keep on paying for it year after year?
The actual board, no. There's some software that does come with it that allows some other functionality that we do have included in the price for 7 years. I have Melanie here from CCS that it helps me with it. But the actual function of the board right here does not have a subscription.
Okay, and after the 7 years, do we have to re-up the subscription to the software?
If we decide that we want to keep the software, it meets our functionality, but 7 to 10 years is the end of life of the board.
Yeah.
Ish. So we may or may not have to update the subscription.
Is the software and the hardware proprietary? Does either thing work with anything else?
We don't need the software to have the board. The software just provides some additional functionality. So if we don't have that software in 7 years, if we decided we don't need it, we can still have, the boards are still functional.
Right.
So they'll work regardless of the software. And then the software, it's a management console and allows some announcements and some display things that you can do, but it wouldn't work without the board because it really is the functionality of the board. I'm doing a really poor job of explaining this, but it is included. We have a 7-year warranty. We have a 7-year subscription to that, and at that time we'd evaluate whether it was end of life for the device.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead with your demonstration.
No problem. Thank you. Feel free to ask questions the whole time, for sure. And again, we'll have more of a chance to show you up close and personal at the end if you wish to. But this is the ViewSonic ViewBoard. This is the similar model to the one that will be in the classrooms. That's on the board agenda tonight. And let's just go ahead and get started, and we'll interact with it here. So one of the great things about it that we have is now moving to the digital age. We have digital resources that are abundant. All of our curriculum and everything is digital. We can access it digitally, which is awesome. And you can get right in through this magic box and through the file. We can get right into our Google Drive, our Microsoft OneDrive. We can even get into old flat panel software and convert them over to this one. I don't know if that's what you were referring to earlier. We have that ability too. We also can get into the embedded web browser. So this web browser allows us to access virtually anything on the internet built in. And what it just opened up here is actually part of our integrated unit. Integrated unit is our social sciences curriculum. And this is a vocabulary book that was developed for kids just to help them with the words and the vocabs they'll be learning. And it's even got activities built into the end. So this is our digital right here through the internet, as you can see. But the great thing about it is we can bring that right into the board itself. They have this snapshot tool down here. And what the snapshot tool does, it will actually allow us to take snapshots of videos, anything online. Even if you go to the desktop mode, you can take snapshots that way and bring them in. And when you bring them in, it allows you to interact now with that. So we can even crop it here, and then we can get just the parts we need. And of course, it's not going to work. There we go. We can get just the parts we need and bring it right into the presentation. And then there's a lot of built-in tools that we can utilize to be able to fully integrate and use the board itself. And you can see I touched my arm against it right there. But we can take any digital resource and bring it right in here, whether it's PDF, whether it's our reading curriculum, especially for centers time, which is great too. We do have the ability to now provide engagement activities for small groups, whole class, and even individuals. So we can actually get in, bring up that embedded browser once again, and this is what's called an H5P activity, which is basically just an activity that's built online where the kids can actually interact and manipulate. This one's designed to help kids with definitions, so it's a drag and drop activity. So this activity is simply more for individual or small groups, especially during center times. I could see that being used. And then if we want to engage more of the class as a whole, like do a formative assessment, there's all kinds of tools right in this magic box. And one of the tools we thought we'd show to you tonight is the pop quiz tool. This pop quiz tool is how we can actually get our entire class or entire audience there. So what happens is it's going to bring up this board, and you saw this QR code. You can actually join, and my team is already going to join it just so we can demonstrate the thing. You can join via the QR code or even the URL, and that's how they can access my board. And there's 3 or 4 different activities that they use that URL for. But as you can see, Kristen already popped up an answer because they know what I'm going to ask. So as a teacher, I could say, okay, class, we have this image of gravity right here. Now you can hear those things pinging in, and it will always bring up notifications up here too, which is great. So I asked them to draw me a picture of a representation of gravity, just another illustration of it. And you can see we can click on the individual images and bring it up. So we got a parachute and an apple falling from the tree. And we can even bring up and hide or reveal all of them at once if we wanted to do it. We also have the ability, which is great, to be able to save these, and maybe we want to use them for a formative assessment or a different use later, which is great. So we can save that and even restart the session. And I can even, you can see, limit it, so only kids can do 1 answer if I really want to. But that's one of the ways that we can get full class engagement. And as you can see, none of them were directly connected to the board when they did that. It was all done. And in fact, this whole presentation, I'm casting from my laptop. So I can be around my entire room interacting with the touch screen and controlling the board from there, which is a really nice feature. I'm not tied to my desk anymore. Let's go ahead and continue on here. The software that you've been talking about is virtually available everywhere, which is great because I don't have to be in my classroom at the board building it. I built this presentation just on my teacher desktop or my teacher laptop, both of them, and then I was able to deliver it to the board by simply logging in. You can see we've got our URL here. It's very easy to log into the boards, and when you do that, it gives you access to all your digital files right then. So as a teacher, I don't have to go find several different things. I can literally click this box and be able to get into my digital files, bring in stuff from shared drives. So as you can see on this image, this screen right here, I've been able to bring in images that support the content, bring in embedded videos, and even there's that snapshot tool. So if I want to take like different things, and even Riley was talking to me a little while ago about esports, being able to have one of his streams up here and then being able to interact and doing activities with that all in the same place. And I can even bring in those web resources. So what I've been able to do is streamline in my entire planning because I have all my resources now in one place and thus streamlining the delivery to the kids. So it really does save that class time too. And there's lots of built-in features. So for example, I'm going to click on this and it's got this built-in feature, which is just a simple text reader. And you can hear it read that to the person at the board. If I open that up, it allows us to interact with those resources that I already had prepared for us. So this is just a website from National Geographic. And what I can do even is interact with the text online. And just like I would on my desktop, it gives several different options. One of them that's really great is this immersive reader tool. And that's gives us a lot of different capabilities, such as being able to read the screen. It can even do pronunciation, and it can even help with translation because it's taking that text. So let's say I want to take that text now. I have the ability to bring this resource directly into my presentation by just simply one click. And one thing that's great when I do that is it's hard to see from your desk, but there's still a little Google symbol right there. And what that does, it links to the original source. So I can be bringing all kinds of things right here, and it's still linked to that. But now it's built in part of my presentation, and I'm able to manipulate it and do all kinds of things. That's just a very brief demo. There's so much more, as you can imagine. This toolbar is rather large, and that magic box, there's a lot of things in there. And we just wanted to give you guys the opportunity, if you wish, to explore with the board. But it's really going to help teachers transform that teaching and learning environment and help them create that multidimensional learning experiences for their kids, both whole group, small group, centers, or whatever the purpose may be. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you guys. A question for you, and whoever wants to answer it, is there going to be any training for the teachers on how to teach class with this? Because you wouldn't know where to start unless you had a little bit of practice.
Agreed. Just watching him, I was overwhelmed. Yes, that's definitely a part. I worked with Melanie to design a PD sequence, and Sean also, that teachers will get some asynchronous training, and then we'll go to the site and do additional training as they get more comfortable, so they'll get to basically be able to go on their board and just function, and then we'll get deeper and deeper into the functionality because you can't do it all at once. So we have that in a multi-session environment. I'll work with Dr. Nansen, the PD department, to arrange that.
Yeah, that was one of the bad things with the old smart boards, was the uptake with teachers wasn't 100%. So
we're doing a few things to help with that. Progressing slowly, working with wonderful principals to make sure we're prepared. They have the conversations they need. Christy's going to be first in line, so so excited that Knox is getting him first. But to work with the principals to know, we're putting 2 flat panels in the media center so the teachers can go and play with it and touch it before the project actually starts. So we're really trying to be sensitive to that and provide the support that teachers need.
thank you. Mr. Orrs, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I got a whole bunch of them, but we're not going to cover them in 15 minutes. How much involvement of the students in, because this is a program that's going to continue to evolve, how involved are the students in the developing of the future applications that you're looking for?
Well, we really, again, core value is not just the teachers, but the students. For example, for the Hamilton High and ACP purchase that is on the board agenda tonight, we ran student focus groups at the 2 schools to talk about what they needed with devices, but it's something that will continue to grow and get student input, working with Mr. Narducci and his advisory council. We actually came, I think the 2nd or 3rd one talked about our strategic plan. So we're really interested in student feedback and making sure that it's focused on what do they need, what do you want the environments to look like as we progress.
Well, the reason I brought that up is that I'm sure you have innovative teachers. The most innovative people that you have in the district are your students.
I would agree.
They will do stuff that you never in a million years would have thought of, and they just take it and run with it.
Yep.
The other part of this is that the key to learning, at least in my perspective, is the application of what I have in front of you. That's what really ingrains it, and as you start to use it, you really, truly learn it. So the more they're involved, the more they're going to learn, and we're in the business of having students learn.
Yes.
Even though the teachers are going to have to learn how to use this thing too. Second question on the esports, which is really interesting. Does this link to game design training for CE? Because game design is a CE pathway. How does the esports link into that?
It's a separate program, but we did use the same technology when we built the game design lab at CTEC and attract students to it. And we're working to it's separate programs and funding, so we have to be careful on, intermingling it. But what we're doing is trying to build a whole ecosystem around it, so they're able to design the games and play the games in the CTE classes.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was getting at. I mean, playing the games is great, and
right.
The critical thinking skills and all the things you gain, but understanding how the game works.
Yes, and the coding and the development behind it.
Yeah, has a lot of value to students. So I had a question about, you talked about security cameras, just kind of briefly in passing, and security cameras that we have in the schools. In high schools, apparently have a lot of them because it's a big school. Elementary schools, a little bit less. This is a big concern with parents. I hear about it all the time. Some want them, some don't want them. How do we develop that policy that keeps everybody happy? I understand the reason for having them. It can, really be useful in certain really difficult situations. But there's also privacy concerns as well. How do we address that?
Well, we have a separate physical network, so it's not something that's out in the cloud. Basically, we focus on keeping the data here in Chandler and being secure. I also work with Dr. Gilbert and Mark Hewish and Ken James to make sure that we are working with the lawyers and that we are using that information to to provide safety for our students, and we're protecting the privacy of them. So I think Dr. Gilbert can speak more to that. We're more on the functional side of it, and then Dr. Gilbert oversees the policy side of it.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one. I don't envy you trying to develop that, but.
Well, we are very specific in the protection of students. So when we deal with our cameras, each site has cameras. They have certain people that have access to those cameras. If somebody from the outside is looking to have any of our information, we work with our attorneys and making sure that we don't just give up, and we're very protective of what we have and within our camera system in how it's managed.
Okay, I understand. Getting back to retention, and I know it's going to be very difficult for you because the people that can work with this stuff are in high demand in industry. The first thing I would think of is that getting back to involving students, starting to involve them in the process of managing these things to the point where maybe they're hireable after they graduate from us, and get them before the industry gets them.
We have 2 cybersecurity programs. We just created tech centers at each of our high schools as we move to one-to-one. And that's something I'll work with Lindsay Duran and CTE, and how do we get students in computer repair? How do we do internships over the summer so we can start attracting and grabbing them, even if they're going through college and getting that talent. And if they spend a few years with us, we'll be lucky. So we definitely have that in the works.
Yeah, career development is a big focus of mine. Maybe we hire them, right when they graduate, and even keep them from going. I don't know if going to college is really going to help you on some of this stuff because the technology moves so fast that I don't think the university can keep up with it.
Agreed. Certifications are a lot in that area and
Right.
different things like that. So that definitely is in our plans.
Okay. So, and the last question on these IFPs and the flat panels, they are hooked into the internet. You can access things on the internet, which is great. However, kids being innovative as they are, how do you control them not using these flat panels in ways that maybe we don't want them to use them?
Same way with the devices. We have a filter that we have in place that filters out specific subject areas, and really we have control over what our students access.
Okay. So, for instance, we have basketball playoffs going here. And I may or may not check the score as I'm up here. But can you pull up a basketball game on there?
If it's connected to the internet and that site is not filtered out, yes.
Okay.
But you can do that on devices too. It's not any different than our desktops or our laptops.
Okay. So the last question, you talked about budgets. This is all going to be really expensive as the whole thing starts to unfold for us. And we don't even know a lot of the stuff that we're going to have to get to support it. What sort of numbers are we talking about?
We're not quite finished with all those numbers. We've been working on it really hard.
Yeah, and I think in May we're going to do a work session where we go over all those numbers. But to be honest, you're looking at a $30 million budget for all technology. That includes switches and network and laptops and security cameras and copy machines and all your software systems. We have 50,000 people who access our system, 45,000 kids, 5,000 employees. I always think that's bigger than most Midwestern towns in the United States. So Colleen and I have been spending with our team this entire year going out and figuring out how many switches do we have, how many laptops, how many desktops do we have, how many copy machines, how many printers, every single software system that we use in the system, from the support side, our side, and the business side, all the way down to the classrooms. And so we're getting to where we can fine tune all those line items to see when do we replace them, how many years out, what is the annual cost, what's the one-time catch-up. That's why we thought it'd be really important in May to come back. We thought this was critical because we're working on our strategic plan and how do we align everything. But the next thing is also to review with you, because we have budgets coming up in the future. So how much are we going to be spending? And also we have a bond potentially that you'll be looking at to seek in the future. How much do we need to put into that bond? How much comes out of capital? How much comes out of E-rate? How much comes from a bond in the future? What comes from our maintenance and operations? And that will be in a whole planning session with the board to go into detail with you at that time.
Okay, so my concern is we may not know, you may never get your arms around this because the technology moves so fast that, what was good this year may not be good next year because things change, more products came out, technology changed and all that. So, and it's not a criticism, I'm just, I'm very uncomfortable that this thing could really blow up on us pretty quick.
We actually feel really good about the numbers that we have for you, so I think we're going to be able to show you all of that. We have gotten down to annually what we think it'll cost plus inflation. We know we're going to have to add some escalation costs in there, and then we also have some one-time to catch up because our district does have some catch-up to do to get us up to par. I remember you asking, why can't we purchase all of the computers at once? And we can't do that. We wouldn't even do that. That's not a smart strategy to do. We do it over a series of time because then you want to replace them during a period of time. Every year we want to replace a number of laptops and desktops. We want to replace some of our switches every year, not all of them at once. So we're trying to strategize to make sure that annually we're replacing things on a cycle and that we have it over 4 or 5, or some of them are 10-year cycles, depending on what product we have or what our needs are. So we do have that. We're almost finished. We've been working all year long on that, Colleen and her entire team. Her team's been fantastic. They've been out researching it, looking at things, and then obviously determining what we need for the future. So we feel really good about that, and then I think in May we are going to be able to present that to you.
Okay.
So just real quick, this team has done an amazing job over the last couple of years of connecting with industry and actually leaders in the industry. Colleen's done a really nice job of implementing that standard. But I think it's the first time our district has gone through the cycling of what you're hearing about, the cycle, so that we don't have all the costs hitting at one time. And you're right, it's a continuous improvement in technology. You're right, the change is going to be faster than we can keep up with, but we know the change is happening, right? All industries telling us it's happening at twice the rate that it has happened before, especially with the advancement of semiconductors. But I believe what they're going to be presenting to you in May is a very conservative plan of how we can keep up. And the cycle thing is really important for this district in the future to know that everything isn't going to come on us at one time. It'll be a continuous growth and a continuous replacement or expansion. So
Okay, so what I'm starting to think is that, there's a lot of stuff that we'd like to have and we may need to have and get forced to buy. But maybe a better approach is just put a cap on technology spending on what we're going to spend each year, do the best we can with it, and wait till next year to get whatever else comes down the road.
Well, we're definitely going to present where we have some recommendation. Colleen and her team, she's got a fantastic team who came up with ideas on how to just keep our system up to speed, not only for the cybersecurity side, but just putting devices in front of students, and then the network side to make sure we have a reliable network. I mean, using that for testing, for curriculum, for all kinds of things. So we're going to put together what we need, what's required to keep us functioning at the levels that we're at. And then there's always innovative ideas, and there needs to be line items for that, for innovation and ideas that are coming forward. The gaming is a great example. I'm super proud of our teacher at Basha and the things that he has done with our students, but those are pretty innovative. We're in front of things than other districts. Some districts have that, but it's pretty cool to see what our staff is doing, and we want to continue to encourage that, getting students involved and engaged. I mean, that's our ultimate goal, is to make sure we have devices and services in front of our students that they can access to become future leaders in this industry. So hoping for that.
So a couple of things. Thank you, Lana. The computers and the devices like this, it's going to be kind of like parking lots. We know we have a certain amount of parking lots, and we know we have to replace a certain amount of parking lots every year, and we can plan for that. Last couple of years, the price of asphalt went up a whole bunch, but we had to keep on replacing parking lots. I mean, that's kind of. And one thing that they didn't mention, I don't think, is these are going to replace our projectors in classrooms, right?
That is correct.
So we're not going to have projectors in classrooms anymore. We're going to have these. That was my two little thoughts on that.
Okay, so I'm just asking to consider maybe a cap and prioritize approach instead of, let's get this, let's get this, let's get this. Because you can get out of control real quick.
Absolutely. Technology definitely can. And I think that when we present it to you, we're going to present our annual technology budget, our one-time catch-up, because, for example, this is a catch-up. Having IFB panels, a lot of districts already have IFB panels. We're trying to purchase them K through 3. Is that correct? K3?
IFP, we're going to do K-12.
K-12.
Yep.
And so ultimately, we are trying to make sure that we're prepared and caught up, and then we have to have them on a cycle. So we'll go over that with you, because it's not just an annual cost, but we have some one-time catch-ups that we're going to review with you, and then it'll be part part of our budget and a budget process every year. It'll also be part of the bond package, so you will actually vote on if you decide to put it out to the voters for an election. You will make a decision on that as a board, and then you'll see the budget on the capital side when we bring that to you during the annual budget cycle. So we will have budgets for you, and then we'll bring it to you. If there's any purchase that we're purchasing that's over a threshold or discussion, we'll bring that to you because our RFPs and IFBs will come through you.
Okay, I just suspect it's going to wind up being the major part of your capital budget from here on out.
It is going to be a huge part of our capital budget, our M&O budget, our E-rate budget, and our bond budget. So all 4 funds, and some of our cash funds.
All right, thank you, guys. I was going to give Barb a chance to chime in. Barb, if you're still listening, if you had any questions or not, we need to wrap it up here pretty soon.
I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay,
Appreciate you checking with me.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Serrano?
No comments from me. I'm in full support of us making sure that we are supporting the future workers with the technology they'll need.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, guys, and thank you for getting done on time. Awesome. We can go on to our next
Mr. Rowley, before we start, Riley, I just want to thank you for coming out and all that you do with our kids. Is that your mom and dad with you? Well, thank you for, well, you know what? Both educators, I want to thank you for coming in, and I know you missed his presentation. This is recorded, so you will be able to catch that because he did an awesome job. So thank you so much for being here.
All right. Thank you, guys. All right. Our next item is going to be Reimagining Schools.
Okay, good evening, Mr. President, members of the board. Thank you for your time. We're going to start with a review of where we are with the Reimagining Learning Environments. My counterpart, Mr. Schleter, is actually at the orchestra concert, so he's the MC at our orchestra concert. So I'm going to start off, and then I'm going to pass it off to Orcutt Winslow, who are huge partners in this endeavor. So really looking at what were the goals of our reimagining process, identifying space as we are decreasing enrollment of how can we relook at our available space while we're looking at maintaining district resources, maximizing our resources, relooking at capture rates. And so when I get further into the presentation, I'm going to talk about some ideas that have evolved as a result of the meetings that Orcutt Winslow has held with the different sites and programming as we look to build cohorts opportunities for our students. Along with that, looking at what specialized programs do we have, what specialized programs can we expand and build on, and then we want to continue looking at student choice. So not only are we a district of choice, but we want to be a school of choice and offer those variety of choices for our students. So whether we are recapturing students from within a school's boundary, recapturing students who may have left our district, and then looking at CUSD as a whole of how can we provide a variety of options and choices for students. So initially we looked at schools that were around the 500 mark. We looked at the demographers report and looked at trends of enrollment and where we sat with those, and we initially identified these schools to be a part of the reimagining process. Now it's evolved over time. We have added San Marcos to the reimagining process. We actually held the first meeting there last night, and we'll hold the second community meeting next week to gather their input to see what they would like to bring to reimagine their school. We've added Conley to the list, and then as you are aware, Galveston moved to the rebuild. The timeline, last March of 2022, that's when the initial schools were identified, what schools were teetering around 500 in enrollment, and we wanted to bring those schools in. Initially, we were looking at schools in the north, but wanted to make sure that we were consistent. So looking at those enrollment numbers, we actually invited 2 schools in the south, Hull and Navarrete, to be a part of this reimagining process because they did meet that criteria for that 500 threshold. Then we held space utilization meetings with committees from those schools. So we invited the 8 schools to create a committee of parents, staff members, and administration. We held 2 meetings with them to share the demographers' reports, trends that we were seeing with enrollments, empty classrooms, what capacity they had, what the acreage was. So that demographers' report was the impetus for us to start those conversations and looking at those trends and what could we do with declining enrollment to reattract students to those schools, offering additional school choice options for our students. Then in November, we came and we presented the information to you, where we were in the process with the reimagining and our steps moving forward. Then January and February is really where we got deeply embedded with Orcutt Winslow. They have been fantastic in the process, so we've hired them to help support us and guide us through this process. Concord and schools, Mr. Schlueter took schools, I took half the schools, and then representatives from Orcutt Winslow facilitated the conversations with the community to talk about how can we reimagine ourselves. We went through divergent thinking, and I don't want to take away from their presentation, but really took them through a process, and it was really nice because a lot of the people in this room, Dr. Gilbert, that there was representation, teaching, and we wanted to make sure what we were doing was something that the district could support, something that the cabinet could support, and we weren't just working in isolation. So Dr. Gilbert felt that it was really important that teaching and learning were at these meetings and engaged. So for all of you that were there with us those nights, thank you. I mean, your insight was so important to help facilitate those conversations and guide those conversations and give your perspective of, you know, if we want to be a culinary school, what does that look like for kindergarten? Probably can't start fires in kindergarten. It was cute with the conversations, and really kudos to Orcutt Winslow because with their meetings and the community engagement meetings, students were the center of it. Students were required to be at every table. Students were required to be the spokesperson. And so we truly did hear from students of what did they want to see their school reimagined as, what brings them joy in learning, what brings them joy in life. So January, February, we conducted those meetings. And then in February, we added San Marcos to the process. And so based on scheduling, like I said, last night we held our first meeting with the community, and we'll hold our second meeting next Tuesday. Then in February, once the meetings had concluded, we met with teaching and learning to kind of share what had arose from the meetings. Because once we have these meetings with the school, if it not support as a district. We really wanted to make sure that if schools were, we could support it with Dr. Edgar's office and curriculum, Dr. Marshall's office, if there were SPED needs that arose from these meetings. So we wanted to really be proactive and transparent in the process from a district teaching, learning, curriculum instruction, so we could support that. Then in March, we conducted site visits. So Tom Dunn's team, Orcutt Winslow, Mr. Schlueter, and I made a visit to each school. We walked the campus over spring break, and we took the ideas. So what ideas came from the committee meetings? What were their ideas for reimagining their schools? And we walked to their campus. So looking at the structural aspect of their campus, what could Orcutt Winslow do to make the vision a reality? Then in April, we held one-on-one meetings with each principal. So representatives from teaching and learning, Dr. Gilbert, Mr. Schlueter, and I met one-on-one with each principal to review what transpired at the meetings, kind of what the big ideas were. We took input from there, and we talked about what do you think you can support moving forward? What do you think is best for your community based on the input from your teachers, and what can we support? So it was nice that regardless of what happens with our structural changes, the instructional piece is going to go on. We're going to continue to reimagine schools, expand our student choice for students.
Barb, if you have your phone on, could you put it on mute?
So we just want to make sure that we're not contingent on the structural changes, that instructionally there are things that we can do moving forward, those goals that I shared to recapture our students, to increase in enrollment. In one example, we're going to expand a program so we can increase the cohort going to junior high. ideas that came out from the committee meetings, and then we met once again when I spoke about teaching and learning, and then with the principals. So going through the different schools, Dr. Edgar's department's done a great job of creating integrated units, and that really came out that teachers want, or principals and teachers, I guess, really want more time with the STEAM activities and those collaborative spaces, really looking at what does our media center look like and our technology center look like? How could we merge those to have more STEM opportunities for our students? And really going into what we already have. The integrated units are already there, but how do we support teachers and dig deeper into those integrated units? Because there's no sense coming up with something new if we have something in place already. DLI, Ms. Chinchilla is doing a great job being the new principal at Bologna, really strengthening that DLI program and retraining the teachers on integrated units and giving them the support that they need. Hull, Mr. Cagle's done a wonderful job of working with Basha High. His whole students feed into Basha High, so looking at Mr. Rohr's, the CTE opportunity. So how can we expose our elementary students at Hull with the cybersecurity, coding, different technology opportunities, and create that pathway for them as they go to Basha High School. Fry Elementary, project-based learning, so once again, looking at the integrated units. And, you know, it was amazing as we had the opportunity to walk these sites and just hear these gentlemen talk about what they could do with the spaces to create those collaborative spaces and give students an opportunity and staff an opportunity to work collaboratively together. Conley looking at selective electives, so giving students choice in what their electives are and creating a rotation with those and providing more opportunities in collaborative spaces, not only for students but for staff as well. Navarrete, looking at a dual language immersion. So right now we have a dual language immersion program at Freedom, which will feed into Payne, but we don't have another feeder school that will feed into Payne that has the DLI, so we want to increase that cohort so when those DLI students get to junior high, there's a bigger cohort for the program to continue. So Ms. Whitlark was on board for looking at the dual language immersion opportunity for Navarrete, and then that serves double purpose because we have that larger cohort going into Payne. Sanborn selective electives, so Mr. McCoy has an experience at his school where students could either choose a fine arts track or a PE track, and so emulating that. So sometimes it's considered like a wheel. So one quarter you pick what specials you want to go to. The next quarter you pick a different specials that you want to go to. A third quarter maybe the school picks, but really focusing in on the fine arts and PE. Actually this year his PTO said we want to have a school play. And so the PTO organized a school play. There was a lot of buy-in from the community. It was well attended. So now they're looking at how can they build capacity. Dr. Galetti just created a partnership with Ballet Arizona to get some ballet exposure to Sanborn students. So really looking at, once again, the selective electives and more opportunities for students. Shumway, the indoor-outdoor integrated spaces. And then San Marcos, like I said, we started the process last night, but Dr. Henderson's looking at that two-way dual immersion. So with the two-way dual immersion, it gives the EL students an opportunity to learn English along with fostering their home language with exposing native English speakers to the Spanish. So it's double purpose because it really supports the needs of her EL students on campus. Benefits to CUSD, I think looking at elective offerings, rethinking the use of the media center and technology. A lot of schools are already creating innovative ways of creating STEM opportunities for their students with the integrated units and providing those opportunities, expanding those. Building capacity, once again, like I had mentioned with the DLI and making sure we have larger cohorts feeding into our junior highs. I was in a DLI kindergarten classroom today at Freedom, and to hear those kids speak Spanish at kindergarten, I mean, is absolutely amazing. And then to see them grow, just the opportunity is incredible for them. Increasing exposure, once again with the CTE opportunities and exposing our students to more CTE opportunities, more of the coding, the STEM, and then creating that pathway specifically. Like I said, Mr. Cagle at Hull has done a great job of working with Lindsay and Basha and figuring out what are you doing and what opportunities can I give my students or expose my students, and we can create that vertical articulation and possibly vertical opportunities for the students. Revitalizing and using our space, thinking of innovative and collaborative uses of our current space. Recapturing students who have left our district, retaining our market share, and being servants, wise servants of our bond dollars. So we are putting the money directly that impacts our students. Servant and Visby, do you guys have questions for me about the ideas that the schools came up with?
Go ahead, Ms. Serrano.
Hi. I wanted to follow up. I've been noticing that, I think I'm a little loud here. Sorry, everyone. I've been noticing that when we're presented about the reimagination process, the table that we're presented with on the enrollment numbers, it seems that we continue to utilize 2021 numbers. And as we're moving along with the process, I would think that it's best we use the most recent and up-to-date numbers to base our decisions and assessments on. So I was wondering if maybe we can update this moving forward to accurate recent 2022 numbers that we do have available. The reason for that is, one example, we have been doing some work with San Marcos, which is why we have these updates with adding them to this group of schools. But San Marcos on this 2021 table shows an enrollment of 357. And while they are currently still under 500, they did grow. And right now our published numbers are actually 405 students enrolled. So I think just to give a more accurate representation would be really helpful moving forward, applying to all of the schools, of course.
Definitely. And maybe what we could do is add another column, because this was our justification for picking the schools originally, but then what we could do is add another column with what our current numbers for 100th day from this year.
Yeah, that would be really helpful,
Okay.
and just to see how the schools have
All
been
right.
advancing in the
And I can
last
work on
year.
that because we already have had our 100th day. So we can add that third column so that we can say, these schools were selected on this 100th day to get started, and this is where we are now.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I would appreciate
Okay,
that.
no worries.
I think it's telling. And then the other thing I wanted to note, I do recognize and understand that some of our families do seek school choice, and we've been following this model. But we also know the reality is that it doesn't apply to all of our district families. And I can use San Marcos as an example there as well. We do have schools in the district that have a really high percentage rate for in-boundary students. That means that these students do attend the school that they're assigned to based off their district address. San Marcos is actually sitting at about an 87% in-boundary rate, which is significant. So making sure that as we apply our analyses and assessment, that we make sure there's space for that consideration, and the families that need to be in boundary for a variety of reasons would be good.
That's a good point. Thank you.
All right. I had a couple of questions. If you could go to the next slide.
If I could also clarify, I believe that the numbers do not include preschool. So when you look at that, you have to look and understand that the difference between that number and the number that's probably published also includes preschool. So we'd have to back out the preschool numbers from the published number to make sure that we're looking apples to apples.
And I was going to add to that, but Dr. Gilbert, just so you know, Patty, we have a report that shows, actually, it's a great report that Tableau creates for every year, and we look at it every day. Like, I looked at it, I pull it up on my phone, I love it, because it shows me 2020, because that's kind of pre-COVID, so we kind of knew what was going on, and then it shows me last year, so I can compare it, and then this year. So this year, like, this is on the 4th of April, so I'm a week off, but we had 406 students, but 32 of those are preschool, and 36 of those are early childhood. So that's 78 or 68 of those students out of that 406. But we do have reports to show you that we run every day that our teams look at. I love to look at it because I like the financial side of it. I like to look at each school, what's going on pre-COVID, last year, this year, to see that too on the annual. But I do think that a lot of the decisions that we were making when we started the process, we like to use those numbers that we talk to our committees about. And so numbers sometimes are consistent in that too. I think the numbers that were up there were when they started the beginning of the process, and we were talking about the previous fiscal year, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's some of where the data continually comes from. But we do, and we can share that with the board, because we like to look at that same data you're talking about every day with where our students are.
Yeah,
Just
I'd
wanna let you know.
appreciate that. And actually, that just prompted another idea. Something that would be helpful, and correct me if I'm wrong, are we to assume that the idea of providing preschools or early childhood education on site at these schools, that's not an ask, or it hasn't been part of the conversation?
I don't understand the question.
So I think we have different numbers of preschool classes depending on the school. I know when I've met with different families from different schools, they feel like I've heard that there's they're advocating for more preschool classes at their school site. So I'm wondering, I didn't see anything pertaining to that as part of the recommendations for the reimagining. So are we hearing anything about that through these committees? Because I think if we do work towards, if there's a need for increasing preschools at the schools, hopefully those families would stay on so that the numbers would also increase K through 6. So I think maybe adding that component if we're not exploring that right now.
I think Lana make you fill us in.
Yes, I love your passion for preschool. I love preschool too. I wanted to fund this kindergarten too. So right now we're funded at, unfortunately, half at kindergarten right now, and they're not funding preschool unless you're a special needs child, and then it's only at part. And so part of our challenge is that we have taken a lot of our Title I money to fund some of our preschools, and then also it's based on income levels if they're going to choose to use our community ed services too. And so we have some funding through Title I, a few other funding sources, and then obviously parents pay. But our staffing are based on those funding sources of what we can. We would love to have preschools in every single one of our schools and a number of those, but it's a funding issue. So it's something that we're always pushing for at the legislature, but just unfortunately they don't even fund kindergarten. And so it's definitely a need. We have backfilled San Marcos because it has grown. I mean, it's declined to 300, and I think about 30 students approximately is at San Marcos even today, or maybe a little bit more than that. I'm off by probably 10 or so. We've slightly declined since last year without preschool and early childhood. So Dr. Marshall has done a great job of backfilling. We try to find ways to take some of our schools, backfill that with other student service and needs that we have, and we've done that kind of across our district as we have space and time. But definitely, I think that's a need that they all want, but part of it is a funding cap problem. So I just want to let you know that I think all of us have a huge passion, but funding just becomes where we're not able to open up classes. Sometimes we'll open them up, and if we can't make that class, then we'll combine it with another and put it at a different school too. So that just happens across our district based on need and number of staffing we have, number of kids we have assigned.
Thanks for explaining that, Lana.
You're
well,
welcome.
I think we need to advocate for us to fund our preschools. I do want to highlight, I actually heard from a concerned mom just yesterday who had to pull their child from one of our preschool classes because of the distance and already doing drop-off with 2 kids at separate schools. They're an involved family in the district, but because there's no preschool provided at their closest school location, they were making the sacrifice of making it work, but they got to a point literally this week where they pulled the kid. So it's definitely something that we need the community's help, I would say, to make sure that we continue to apply pressure for the funding that's needed for our kids. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I did have a question about, I can't remember which slide it was, I would tell you, but my connection to my server has been lost. That one.
Okay.
If I only had, I don't think anybody's at home at the IT department. All of these made sense, and I really like the idea of having the dual language, especially like the schools like San Marcos, where we need to have people learn Spanish, but also those people from that are newly arrived, they lose their Spanish, and it doesn't come back a lot of times if they don't practice it. Some way, what was the longer explanation behind increasing their indoor and outdoor spaces? I mean, we're supposed to be improving the schools and drawing more people in and helping everybody out, but I don't understand the logic behind the one in Shumway, and maybe that's just because it's a one-sentence thing.
Right, and Orcutt Winslow's going to go into that in their presentation about the
Okay.
different spaces and the
Okay, well,
collaborative spaces.
okay, let's not steal their thunder for now then. Let me go to Barb and see if she's got any questions, and then Kurt. Barb, do you have anything to ask right now? She may have stepped away. Kurt, did you have any questions on this part?
Yeah, just one. Because you touched on this, and it kind of piqued my interest. Because you were talking about recapture rates, or to me, more generally, capture rates of whatever demographics around the school. And I'm sure somewhere that we do track that. But that's something that, I think we should probably see, that if a school, say like San Marcos, which is essentially a neighborhood school, how many of the kids are they capturing in their boundary? And recapturing students that we lost, so we can see that we lost for whatever choice reasons. How do we get those students back in a very specific strategy, which is actually a marketing strategy? I think it's something we need to get very, very serious about and really start to pay attention to, because that's dollars to the district, and that's how we run our business. So at some point, and I know if Dr. Gilbert can speak to that, but I think we need to really focus on that. Thank you.
We actually continue to look at that every year. I'm sure we can look at the numbers. I know that Lana's department, Miss Berry's department looks at that quite often, because that is our business of making sure our students. We also know that many of our students choose our own schools, so we track that as well. And sometimes it's a little harder when people leave our district. We don't know where they are, but we're always, and which is one of our strong suits of having choice. With our schools, to try and do the best that we can in order to keep our students at our schools. So we are looking at that, and we can talk more about that and share that with the board.
Okay, so if everybody's all right for now, let's let the OW guys go ahead with their presentation. If you guys could leave us a couple minutes to talk at the end, I'm sure we'll use it.
Perfect. Okay, so I'd like to introduce Vispi Karanja and Saravanan Bala. So they have been our huge partners in all of this process, facilitating the site meetings and guiding us through the envisioning and changing. So I don't want to steal their thunder in their PowerPoint, but they've been a pleasure to work with and have really guided us to really, how do we reimagine our learning spaces and opportunities for our students.
Good evening. Good evening, Mr. President, members of the governing board, Mr. Naruchi, the cabinet member. First of all, I'd like to thank you for taking the initiatives to do the reimaginations of the schools. It has been a wonderful experience. I would like to thank Heather and Leo for long evenings. It was really heartening to see how the community got involved, the teachers, and most importantly, like Heather mentioned, the stars of the show were the kids. We had some great ideas come from them. They participated full on and presented the ideas which they came up with. So we are going to go through that a little bit. I'll just give you a quick 2-minute introduction of Orchid Winslow. I'm Vispi Karanja, I'm the managing partner, and I've been with the firm for over 29 years, and Saravanan Bala is our education principal. We are in 6 states. We do a lot of education. We are a firm which is dedicated and passionate about education across these 6 locations. We've done a lot of schools, and each school is also very important to the traditions, the culture, the local things which they have. So we always try to bring the national level expertise to your local school district and your local community on what would work for them. A lot of buzzwords here at the bottom, that schools are supposed to integrate technology, flexible furniture. We talk about campus as a hub of the community. But the most important thing is that the process which you've initiated, a lot of creative ideas are going to come out of that, and we're excited to share what process we use to kind of derive those questions we use to have those ideas come out, and what the next steps would be. So with that, I'll turn it over to Saravanan.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. President, members of the governing board, administrators. It's a true pleasure to be here and to have this conversation with you. So we're fortunate to have this opportunity to work with you and your schools and your communities to help them reimagine what teaching and learning can be with the environment behind their back. So I think that's a huge part of this process. So we started this process as Heather mentioned back in January. And we structured engagements with the various schools. As you see on the screen, it was a two-part process. The first part, we typically engage when the district has a strategic plan or a portrait or some type of an educational aspiration. It's important to understand how a community processes that and how a community can think about aligning with a larger district's purpose. So the first engagement dates you see, that's primarily what drove that conversation. And so the agenda for these meetings typically started with a quick introduction, and then we would have Heather and or Leo, depending on which campus they're serving, come up and just talk a little bit about the portrait, the journey to excellence that you're currently developing. And then we get into the engagement parts. We start the engagement with essentially feeling the pulse of the room, understanding what the community's perception is of where you are as a district from the strategic planning perspective and the portrait of the learner. And then we back that with a bit of a primer, is what we call a primer. So we did that, and then there's some secondary polling after that, and then there's quite a bit of group discussion, getting the community into various breakout groups and having them discuss some of the ideas that's on the screen to see how they can really imagine where their specific campus can go in terms of teaching and learning and aligning that with the facilities. So, where is this going? I'm just going to scroll. All right, so we started with obviously with Heather and or Leo presenting the various aspects, the pillars of the journey to excellence and the portrait of the learner, and just trying the understanding started and to just serve as the basis for the polling that we start this conversation with. And then the polling essentially included 4 questions to begin with. And here's some pictures of the various schools. I believe this is Hall and Conley. And so it was robust participation in this process. And that was heartening to see. And as was mentioned, the real neat thing for us is to see how engaged the parents and especially the kids were. And so getting the polling questions going, and some of the polling questions had to do with establishing a benchmark or a foundation, the current state, in terms of how each school site is, for instance, aligning with the portrait of the learner, for example. What are some of the skills that they're currently nurturing and some of the skills they're cultivating in their kids? And you know, I have a sample of this. There's obviously a lot of data, but I just have a sample of one of the schools just to illustrate some of the things that came up. And I will say this, that empathy was prominent in pretty much every one of your campuses. So that was heartening to see. Because I think that is one of the hardest things for kids this day and age, to really embrace their minds around. So it was very heartening to see that, and that was in pretty much every one of the campuses. And then we follow up with a question about skills with the programmatic aspect. So one of the beliefs is the fact that the school is not a building, right? A building is part of a school. And so that emphasis really starts with understanding the focus of why we do this, and then thinking about the teaching and learning side, and then think about what do we need from a facility angle. So that's essentially what the direction of the programming, the question was. And so when we ask questions about what are some of the things that the schools are doing now as it relates to those skills building and cultivating activities, you know, sampling of responses come up. And then we begin to have them time travel, mental time travel, I like to call it. Think about what are some future things they could be doing, or what are some things they could be doing that they have thought about that could really make an impact in skills building, in aligning with the portrait and the strategic plan. And so we get them to think about the future state. And then we bookend that conversation with bringing it back home to their specific situation. Now think through the skills aspects of it, the programmatic aspects of it, current and future, and now think about the facilities angle. What do we need to think about these facilities as part of that solution? How do the facilities help and foster and catalyze the types of programmatic offerings to build the types of skills that are in your portrait? And so there's a wide variety of first flush options, you know, bathrooms and things that are on people's minds day to day. That comes up quite a bit. And then the next part of that is what we would call our key design primers. And essentially, we like to think about this process as trying to make the connection between learning environments and learning. And so we ground this in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then how we process that to build that solid foundation of good design that creates a foundation of physical and psychological safety, allows the educators, the faculty, the community to really innovate with curriculum, pedagogy, and instruction, and provide those tools to the faculty in terms of the professional development needed for teachers to be successful. The ultimate goal, obviously, is to have self-actualized learners who are grounded, who have a sense of identity, who are thriving global citizens. So that's essentially the angle to the conversation. So we presented these types of ideas, and it's about a 5 to 10 minute presentation on the key ideas. And then we bookend that with another poll, is to have the school think about where do you see their specific community ranking in these major criteria, major areas. And so the previous polling questions and this poll question is the basis for our group discussion. And so the group discussion essentially is anchored with our Think Big slide, which is to really think about how can you really innovate with the programmatic aspects, and then through the lens of that, the facilities. And so here's examples, if I can scroll, there we go. So very robust participation in all of the discussions, kids especially. And so almost in every situation, the kids were the protagonists. They were the drivers of the conversation. And they got up and presented like they've been doing this forever, which was incredible for me to see. It was so heartening to see. And so what that also did was the ultimate stakeholder, the ultimate client, the students, were the ones driving the conversation. And that was very, very important for us personally, and it was fantastic. So through the breakout discussions, we have these huge Post-it notes. We have all types of notes that come from that. We take it, and we try to look for patterns within that to see that we need to carry forward specific to a campus. And some of the phrases that would come up in terms of exploring a grade level community, where co-teaching could happen, or specifics to outdoor learning, like a chum was one of the factors that came up. Outdoor learning was a big part of that conversation. And so this really forms the basis for our second engagement. And again, these are the dates the second engagement happened. Usually it's about a couple of weeks after the first one that allows us to process the data and come back. And so the second engagement essentially is about really having the schools imagine what that transition or reimagination looks like, actually. We've established in the first engagement a current state, and then also have them imagine what a future state could look like. Then how do you actually make that transformation? So for us, thinking about transformation really starts with the program, because it's not just the facility, and I like to joke, it's not Field of Dreams. If you build it, they won't come. So there's got to be capacity building behind it. And so thinking about the programmatic side and really starting with that. So every second engagement started with taking the data from the first engagement in conversation with the district, and to see what are some of the themes emerging out of this programmatically that can really drive the conversation forward. And so that was the starting point. So we did a pre-poll in every situation, and we always do the pre-poll, and then after the discussion, we check to see if those ideas still are true, because it's when people see certain things on the screen at the beginning, they may see that's a great idea to move forward. But as you start thinking about ideas from a deep implementation standpoint, some of the programs may not necessarily hold water. So see, in every one of these situations, and I'm only using one example here, is a pre-poll, and really ground this in this idea of making sure the environment is part of the solution, not a challenge. And so we think about reimagination as not just the where, it's the who, the what, the why, and the how. It's a combination, it's a broad stroke approach. So we use a specific framework in our work to allow for these types of conversations, to essentially ground the conversation in 21st century teaching and learning, having a pedagogy there, and then having the leadership within the school and this district to enact and to support that vision. And the deep implementation part of it is the key part. So it's easier to do things at a superficial level, but how do you implement a content area expertise or some type of a curricular idea pretty deeply? How do we do that? Conversation we led. So again, going back to group breakouts, several conversations about the different program structure impact areas. So we have the communities think about implementation from 4 program structures. It's not just space, it's time, it's personnel, and groupings as well. So here's some of the results from this engagement. So we have each school think about how a specific idea for a new type of curriculum, how would that impact not just the space, but personnel and time management, scheduling, but also what types of groupings do we need to engage with to be successful in that model. So it's not just the space, it's a broader stroke. And then after that conversation, we have the poll again that we started with to see if any one of those ideas, in this specific case, there was fairly equal representation, maybe a little less with robotics and engineering, but in the specific campus, the conversation as evolved, leadership and STEM and STEAM were more practical in terms of deep implementation. That's essentially how we see this evolving. So as people think about this, they may say, well, this might have been a good idea, but this potentially is more meaningful. And so that anchors that. And part of the discussion also involves them really focusing on their facilities. And we start that at the first engagement, but really venture into it deeply in the second. And think about each group as they're reporting out, we build another poll about what are some themes emerging from a facility standpoint that can really ground this process. They're thinking about program, but also thinking about facilities, right? So that gives us the basis in this specific school. Flexible and collaborative learning spaces was huge. Indoor-outdoor connected spaces, that again seemed to be fairly a common recurring theme. Emphasis on collaboration, learner-centric features. And technology obviously was also a major factor. And again, depending on campus, it was up or down. And so this was then the basis as we were discussing and collaborating with the district leadership. There's a programmatic option that is evolving per campus, as was presented earlier. And then now we have some priority lists that come out of this process. And then the walks, the facility walks, happened. Trying to connect the dots between these two is our walks are designed to see where is the path of least resistance to be able to implement potentially an indoor-outdoor connected space, or trying to engage with a grade level community configuration. Is that potential exist across all grade levels, or should it be tried within a certain grade level to see what gaps exist and how can those gaps be addressed? So, in this specific situation, walking through the media center to see if a community hub can be created, if that can have that indoor-outdoor connected learning opportunity, can that feature flexible learning, can that feature collaborative space? So that was the basis of the walks. So where we're headed with this is a report that'll capture this entire process like we've done in the past. And the process will involve thinking about the various data collection exercises in terms of what is really needed for the transformation. What are some of those that become district-wide priorities? What patterns are we seeing across the district? Like flexible furniture and spaces was a theme that emerged across the board. So I would imagine something like that would be at the district level. And then what are some campus-specific things that can really ground the teaching and learning side into what the facility angle is? So what is that? So having a report published such as this, and then developing a rough order of magnitude. These are going to be high-level, square footage-based costing based on what we're touching, without any kind of deep testing to understand a lot of engineering behind it, but just to give the district a high-level overview of what could it take to implement some of this work. So anyway, so that's where we are, and our process is right now to create those rough orders of magnitude and continue to work with the district leadership to present that at some point down the road. Take some questions.
All right, thank you very much, guys. I appreciate that. Let's start with Barb. Barb, if you were still listening, do you have any questions? She must have gone away. Kurt, do you have anything?
Yeah, apparently there's a final report due at some point, which looks to be very interesting. When can we see that?
So we're shooting for the end of May to have that final report.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I really appreciate the methodology shared. I'm really big on design and process, so thank you for all of this work. I was curious with the committees that are informing and showing up, comparing school to school, we had the first engagement and the second engagement. Are the retention rates of people coming back for the second one similar across all of the schools? Are we seeing any differences there, just so that we understand what the feedback and comparing the schools?
In my assessment, has been very consistent. And so, which was very heartening to see, because this is an evening on a busy work week that, maybe the sugar and the salt helped, but, everybody showed up for sure.
Okay, that's good to know. I just wanted to know if there was any disproportionality there.
Right.
So that they were a kid and they wanted to come for the Doritos or be a part of it. But we found that in a lot of instances, the second meeting had more because people heard about it and wanted to be a part of it.
That makes sense. And a follow-up question more related to the design process and gaining feedback from there. I think CUSD takes pride in being innovative and, wanting to be the first and breaking ways for inclusivity. So in regards to design and moving forward with more of a inclusive design in regards to maybe like bathrooms, I know nationwide we've been seeing with new builds that coming into play, and certainly we've had some student feedback within the district asking for that need to be met. So with this opportunity with rebuilding, I'm curious if that's being taken into consideration.
So in our conversation, we include inclusion and trauma-informed design as one of the foundational elements in our conversation. And it is setting up to make sure that we reach kids where they are and make sure the environment is welcoming. It creates a sense of belonging and does not trigger traumas for kids. So across the board, we've talked about inclusion as a foundation to any of these conversations, and it's come up quite a bit in the data that you will see in the final report.
I appreciate that. And just to highlight something that was brought to my attention that was enlightening, I think when we talk about inclusivity, sometimes people tend to navigate to just thinking about like gender neutral bathrooms or the LGBTQ community. But what I've learned from listening to many of our students is that there's a broader spectrum, with even students feeling uncomfortable utilizing the restroom due to reasons like body dysmorphia, others who might be diabetics. There's just a wealth of different reasons there. So I think the more we can meet their needs, as you said, the better. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would imagine any future work that would involve a deeper conversation as it relates to every school site.
Great.
All right, thank you. You guys rolled through the fine print there, but I would like to know what your square foot cost for a new build is based on.
We haven't gotten that far yet. So it's for the new build or for the renovations?
For a new build.
It depends on the types of projects. So one story, what would you say this be? 350, 375, something like that? That's what we're experiencing, somewhere in that range?
And also, Jason, on new build, it also depends on whether it's classrooms you're adding to that campus or is it a cafeteria or gymnasium. But for replacement schools, we're looking at that range.
At what?
At about 325
to 375.
375.
All right, thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions? I think we can, if not, then I think we can take a 10-minute break before our normal business meeting starts. Guys, I appreciate it very much. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
All right.